to stand up for the truth and justice, to stand up for what one believes in, to stand up with courage and fortitude, to stand up bravely is not easy. It is likely that when we stand up and face challenges, we might tend to give up and give in. The readings of today, the first reading and the gospel, are challenging us not to do that. In the first reading, Jeremiah is reluctant at first to be a prophet of God, to speak on behalf of God, because he knows the consequences for speaking on behalf of God. When finally he decides, because he cannot contain it within himself any longer, and when he speaks the truth, he is put into a cistern, into a pit from which there seems no escape. Jeremiah is despondent. Jeremiah is worried. Jeremiah is concerned, but yet Jeremiah knows that the Lord will rescue him. As a matter of fact, the name Jeremiah means in Hebrew, Yirmi Yahu, my Lord has raised me. So even though he is in the pit of despair, even though he is in the pit of hopelessness, Jeremiah perseveres and will continue to be courageous and brave and persist in his speaking God's word, confident in the knowledge that God will raise him from the pit. In the gospel of today, Jesus speaks very similar words when he says that he has come on earth to cause division. The division that Jesus will cause is not because he wants to cause the division, but because of the stand that he will take. When he takes a stand for justice, when he takes a stand for peace, when he takes a stand for the oppressed and the marginalized and the poor, then the oppressor and the one who will dominate and the rich will look at him as someone who is an insurgent. They will look at him as someone who is a terrorist, and they will want to do away with him because he overturns the tables. He upsets the apple cart. He turns the world upside down. But Jesus will not be deterred. Jesus will not be frightened. Jesus will not be cowed down by the threats that the rich and the famous make against him. He is clear that his one purpose in the world is to speak God's word. And God's word is a word primarily addressed to the poor. It is a word which says that God cares for them, that God is their father and their mother, and that God will ensure that justice will prevail. It is likely that sometimes injustice might seem to be prevailing. It is likely that sometimes the rich might seem to be dominating. It is likely that sometimes the oppressor might seem to crush and press down the oppressed. But it is also true that, like in the case of Jeremiah, like in the case of the Lord, Jeremiah was taken out of the pit and continued to proclaim the Lord's word fearlessly. Jesus was nailed to the cross, but was also raised from the dead. And the challenge before us is today to ask whether we will speak and live God's word. God's word is a word which says that we must show our concern for the poor, not by simply good and kind words, but by tangible, meaningful, and real actions. If we speak, not by speaking with our tongues, but with our actions, then we have spoken loudly. St. Francis of Assisi was fond of saying, preach the gospel, when necessary, use words. In other words, our preaching must be done primarily through our actions. if I am just in my dealings with others, if I am giving in my relationship with others, if I do not hold but am selfless with others, then I have preached the gospel eloquently and loudly, and the world will hear what I say. Then, like Jeremiah and like the Lord, I have fulfilled my task in the world. I have become a prophet of the Lord, for I have spoken and lived God's word.